In this tutorial, I want to talk about some of the more advanced features of Chord Maestro that you may not need to play around with that often, but they're good to know about. So to start off with, let's open up a chord chart. Alright, so I talked about how to add anchor points in previous tutorials, so that's pretty straightforward. You just either use spacebar or this anchor button here. So what I had done before was basically just a straight pass through of all of the sections. So that's kind of assuming that your chord chart is just a linear progression through the song, and you might have repeated choruses and so forth. Well, that's one way to do it, and that may be how we always want to do it. But there is actually another way that maybe is even more simplified, and that involves being able to jump between sections in a specified way. So what we can do is we can tailor the navigation to be a little bit more complex than what we have here by default. So if I jump over here to details, you notice I've got 3 anchor points defined. As I mentioned, these are just given numbers by default. So just so I can keep track, but let's do this. So the first one's intro, the second one's verse 1, the third one's verse 2. Okay, so call this intro, call this verse 1, and we'll call this verse 2. Now over here on the right we have the navigation sequence. So you've got the individual anchors defined, which represent positions within the document. Then we have the sequence over here, which indicates the ordering in which we want to go through those anchors. So by default, as you add an anchor point, it will create an entry in this navigation sequence. Let's say you wanted to repeat some of these sections over and over again. So let's say that we wanted to do the intro, verse 1, verse 2, and then we wanted to jump back to verse 1 and do verse 2 again. Then all we have to do is just select the anchor points over here and use this arrow button, and what that'll do is it'll stick a additional anchors into the navigation sequence. Okay, so let's just drag this guy to reorder it. And so now the navigation sequence will be intro, verse 1, verse 2. It'll jump back to verse 1 and then to verse 2. So let's jump back over here to our document, jump to the front. Okay, so now we're at intro. If we hit the next anchor, it'll jump to verse 1 as we'd expect, verse 2. And you notice up here in the indicator, it says that the next anchor we're going to go to is actually verse 1. So if we jump back there, it will take us back to verse 1 and then verse 2, and those are all of the navigations sequence that we've defined. So you can really, if you wanted to, you could make these confidence screen arrangements very, very simplistic as opposed to having everything repeated multiple times. If you've got a simple, strong song structure, you can just basically have Chord Maestro jump between the anchor points in whatever navigation sequence that you want. And if I want to make changes here, I can always just delete that. I can use this shift up and shift down to move between anchor points, no problem. All right, so that's all I wanted to talk about with in terms of the navigation between anchor points.